Mr. President, there has been a lot of criticism waged at the Majority Leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, for his discussion about the Koch brothers. And I think that that criticism of Senator Reid is unfortunate, because I think what he is trying to do is to educate the American people about what the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision has done in allowing billionaire families like the Koch brothers, like Sheldon Adelson and others, to pump hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process in order to elect candidates in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House who are working overtime against the best interests of the middle class and working families of this country, and at the same time are working to provide even more tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires and large, profitable corporations. And I think that it is important when we talk about the Koch brothers not to make this discussion personal. It's not a personal discussion. It is a discussion about what the most powerful political family in this country believes. If they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and this is a family worth $80 billion, and they may end up spending, in fact, billions of dollars on campaigns, what is it that they want? What do they believe? What do folks like Sheldon Adelson believe when they invite potential Republican candidates for president to come to Las Vegas for what has been called the Adelson primary, where he will listen to them and decide who he might support and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on in a presidential campaign? So I think it's important that we know what the Koch brothers believe. And here's the best information that I have. In 1980, as it turns out, David Koch, one of the two brothers, ran for vice president of the United States on the Libertarian Party. And what is interesting to me is to what degree the platform that he ran on, which in 1980 got him 1% of the vote on the Libertarian ticket, to what degree that extremist set of positions has now become mainstream Republican today. And, Mr. President, what I want to do is just take a few minutes to quote exactly what was in that 1980 platform and to have the American people recognize to what degree ideas that at one point were considered extremist are now mainstream Republican. This is what was in the 1980 Libertarian Party platform that David Koch ran for vice president on. Quote, "We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission," end of quote. What that means, Mr. President, is that the Koch brothers, and increasingly the Republican Party, now believes there should be no campaign finance laws, that Citizens United did not go far enough, and that the Koch brothers should be able to spend millions of dollars directly by giving that money to individual candidates. That's what the Koch brothers said in 1980. That is what many Republicans believe today. Let me quote again, exact quote from the platform. Quote, "We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system," end quote. There are many Republicans today who not only want to see cuts in Social Security, but who ultimately want to privatize Social Security, who believe that it is unconstitutional for the United States government to be involved in retirement benefits for seniors. Quote, 1980 Libertarian Party platform, We oppose, now listen to this one, this is really quite incredible. We oppose all personal and corporate income taxation, including capital gains taxes. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. End of quote. Repeal of all taxation? That's the government. Basically what they are saying, very boldly, straightforwardly, we have to respect their honesty, they don't believe in government. Now, I have not heard any of my Republican colleagues here say they want to abolish all taxation. That is not what they say, and that's not what they believe. But on the other hand, it is important to note that the Ryan budget, just passed in mid-April in the House, provides a $5 trillion tax break over a 10-year period, mainly by cutting the top individual income tax rates significantly. In other words, what many of our Republican colleagues believe, that in a time when the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well, at the same time as the middle class disappears and more people live in poverty, what my Republican colleagues believe is we should give more tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. Mr. President, the Koch brothers' position in 1980 were that they support, and I quote, Libertarian Party platform, quote, "We support repeal of all law which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws." End of quote. Now, what does that mean? Yesterday, we had a vote here on the floor of the Senate which said that a $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a poverty wage, that people who are working 40 hours a week and are making 7.25 hours are living in poverty, that they cannot raise families on those wages, and that if we raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, we could bring approximately 28 million Americans out of poverty. On that vote to overcome a Republican filibuster, one Republican voted with members of the Democratic caucus, and we lost that vote. Now, what is interesting, Mr. President, is not simply that almost every Republican voted against raising the minimum wage. What is more significant is that many Republicans believe that we should abolish the concept of the minimum wage. Many of us know Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma to be an honest and straightforward guy. He tells it the way he sees it. This morning on the Morning Joe television show, this is what Senator Coburn said, and I quote from the transcript. "I don't believe you ought to interfere in the market. If there's to be a minimum wage, my theory is I don't believe there ought to be a national minimum wage. That's my position." End of quote. In other words, what Senator Coburn is saying today, and in fact what many Republicans agree with him on, is we should abolish the concept of the minimum wage, something that the Koch brothers were talking about 34 years ago. Now, what are the implications of that? If you do as Senator Coburn suggested, just let the market work. Don't have government interfere by establishing a minimum wage that American workers should receive. What it means, quite simply, when you let the free market work, is that if you are in a high unemployment area and you have many workers competing for few jobs, an employer will say to you, well, I am prepared to hire you, good news, and I'm going to pay you $4 an hour. And the worker says, I can't live on $4 an hour. That's a starvation wage. And the employer says, well, that's okay, because I got 20 other workers who are prepared to accept that wage. That's what happens when you abolish the concept of the minimum wage. Mr. President, many of us, and I think the vast majority of the American people, have a vision of where our country should go. We don't believe that you should be abolishing the minimum wage. We don't believe that you should be cutting or privatizing Social Security or transforming Medicare into a voucher program or making horrendous cuts to Medicaid. What, in fact, the American people want is the federal government to start standing up for working families rather than millionaires and billionaires. And in poll after poll, what the American people have said is they want us to invest in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of decent-paying jobs. That's what the American people want, not tax breaks for billionaires, but the creation of millions of jobs through rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. The American people, despite what Senator Coburn and others may believe, want us to raise the minimum wage. Poll after poll suggests that the American people want us to raise the minimum wage to at least $10.10 an hour. The American people do not want us to cut Social Security. In fact, more and more Americans want us to expand Social Security to make sure that when elderly people reach retirement age, they can live and retire with dignity. Mr. President, I think there has perhaps never been a time in the modern history of this country where the political lines have been drawn as clearly as they are right now. If you listen to the Koch brothers, if you read the Republican Ryan budget in the House, their positions are quite clear. Tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires and significant cuts in the programs that are life and death for the middle class and working families of this country. That is not what the American people want, and it is time we began to listen to the American people. It's time that we took on those people, those billionaires who are spending huge amounts of money electing candidates that represent their interest, and it's time we listen to the working families of this country who are struggling to survive. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.